5 U.S. states will decide this next election, including Georgia and Arizona and Michigan. And there's evidence that the president has real problems in all of them. And one other factor to all this is that there may be he may be able to coalesce a majority in those states to reject Donald Trump, but there are third party candidates who are talking about running in those states and they might get ballot access. And that's a problem for Joe Biden because it gives people who are like his policies but concerned about his age a way to vote for somebody other than Donald Trump, and that would rob him of support.
Now, NBC News is projecting that President Joe Biden has now clinched the Democratic presidential nomination, winning a majority of the necessary number of delegates, with more primaries being held today and setting up what's expected to be a bitter, closely contested rematch with Donald Trump. The outcome had never been in much doubt when it came to who was going to get the Democratic nomination. Biden had faced only token opposition as the party's biggest names, such as Governor Gavin Newsom of California and Governor Gretchen Whitmer of Michigan, opted to sit out the race rather than challenge a sitting president who's already beaten Donald Trump once. Well, Conan Nolan is political correspondent for NBC. Good evening to you, Conan.
Good evening.
Good to have you with us. Just bring us up to date then with the latest. It does seem as though Joe Biden has now been confirmed as the Democratic candidate. Where have we reached?
Yes, and that's, as you pointed out, not a surprise. And there was no one that was going to run against him on the Democratic side because of the history that relates to past primaries where an incumbent member of the same party is challenged by someone from that party. Ted Kennedy, the senator from Massachusetts, did it against Jimmy Carter, and of course he failed. Jimmy Carter was the nominee, but he damaged him enough that he lost to Ronald Reagan in 1980. Herbert Walker Bush, the president of the United States, ran in 92 for reelection, and he had a fellow named Pat Buchanan, a right wing conservative, run against him. Again, Mr. Buchanan didn't defeat him in the primary, but he weakened him just enough so that Bill Clinton could win in the fall. So it would ruin anybody's career, Gavin Newsom or Gretchen Whitmer's or anybody else, if they were to take on Joe Biden within the party and lose, but weaken him for Donald Trump. So it's all Biden, and frankly, it's going to be all Donald Trump. This is one of those unique moments where there's really not a contested primary in either party.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be a fascinating rematch. Just to speak about Joe Biden, we've had Robert Hur, the special prosecutor who was looking into Biden's handling of classified documents. Now, he was standing by his finding, which rather controversially described Biden as a well-meaning elderly man with a poor memory. What about those concerns over Joe Biden's age? Clearly, they haven't stopped him getting the Democratic nomination. But do you think that what we've seen, the signs of him really showing his age, are they going to be a big factor in this presidential race?
Well, quite possibly. I mean, the most recent New York Times Siena College poll indicates that something like 60% of Biden voters from 4 years ago believe he shouldn't be the nominee this time. Doesn't mean they won't vote for him, but they think he's too old. And that's amongst the president's supporters. So, yes, he had the State of the Union speech last week where the president did a good job. There's any reasonable standard, he performed well. But even by that standard, the fact is that Republicans will say that the bar was so low that it was a proof of life speech that he could actually read from a teleprompter and do all right in the setting of a State of the Union. The fact remains we have a long campaign ahead, and I think it's going to be a lot of attention will be put not just on what Joe Biden says, but his performance. And that's what has a lot of people concerned, even on the Democratic side. They might not say it on camera or openly, but they're still worried about it. We got a long road to go. He's got a lot of performance that he has to where he needs to allay the concerns of the electorate that he's up for the job at the age of 80. He will be 82 if he wins a second term by the time he takes the oath of office.
And Donald Trump, is he going to reach the threshold to be confirmed as the Republican candidate tonight?
Yeah, I think he may, but it's a fait accompli in many of the states, including California, for example, which is the largest state in population. The Republican Party changed the rules so that if you just won a majority of the vote, you received all of the delegates to the national convention where you were formally nominated, and that was all done to make sure Donald Trump got all the delegates, which he did last week from the largest state in the nation. There's nobody competing against him. Nikki Haley, the former UN ambassador, folded up her tent after last week. She didn't endorse him, but there's no active opposition to his claiming the Republican nomination. There's no question about it. We are going to have a rematch from 4 years ago.
And how do you think that is going to shape up? Recent polls seem to put Donald Trump in the lead, but Joe Biden seems to have picked up a bit since that State of the Union address that you were talking about. It's going to be a pretty closely fought race, isn't it?
It is, and it's going to boil down to five U.S. states. Forget the national, as you well know. The United States has you might call it an odd way of selecting a president, but five U.S. states will decide this next election, including Georgia and Arizona and Michigan. And there's evidence that the president has real problems in all of them. And one other factor to all this is that there may be he may be able to coalesce a majority in those states to reject Donald Trump, but there are third party candidates who are talking about running in those states and they might get ballot access. And that's a problem for Joe Biden because it gives people who are like his policies but concerned about his age a way to vote for somebody other than Donald Trump, and that would rob him of support. So it's going to be a very complicated path to victory for Joe Biden. He knows it, and I think their strategy is simple. Regardless of what you think of my age, the other guy's almost as old as I am, and he's crazy. So vote for me instead.
And do you think we are going to see head to head presidential debates as this campaign unfolds?
Well, the president was asked that, and he says, "Well, depends on just whether he will, I think, behave himself, or if he will conduct himself in a proper manner."